Welcome to Telltales. I'm Mike Nicoletti. Every week, along with my co-hosts Jason Wallace and Hunt Lawrence, we bring you the Cash Flow Memo. Get it at Telltales.us. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into energy, technology, and healthcare. So download the memo now and get started.
The following conversation is intended for informational purposes only. You should always do your own work to determine if an investment is suitable for you.
Well, now we jump to the time. Where we have 10 minutes on predictions. Last week, for people who didn't catch us last week, we did macro and energy. And Mike and Jason were very active. I think we had 5.5 predictions, what would be surprises against conventional wisdom. And at least 2 out of it, actually 3 out of the 5.5. Theoretically, I'm the energy expert and the macro expert. 3 out of the 5.5 were proposals by Mike and Jason. So now they have the floor to do tech surprises. And I've been thinking all the 7 days, how can I come up with 1 or 2? And I'm sitting here this afternoon and I don't have any. So the floor goes over to Mike and Jason for 5 or 5.5 tech surprises for the year. Next Wednesday, we will do 5 or 5.5 surprises for healthcare. But Mike, Jason, over to you guys for your tech surprises.
Well, I'd say back on last week's, just take with a grain of salt the surprises that came from Jason. On tech, Jason, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So one prediction we have is that stablecoins will process more monthly transaction volume than SWIFT by the end of this year.
And for clarity, what's SWIFT? And by volume, you mean dollars?
Dollar volume, not number of transactions. And so SWIFT is the messaging service for processing payments internationally. The stablecoins are more and more being adopted to handle those transactions because you can move dollars or you convert between currencies much more efficiently, quickly, more often. And it's being adopted by U.S. companies. After the Genius Act, it put a framework around it, and it's more and more common that it's being adopted. The one we've highlighted in the past was SpaceX uses it to remit global payments back to the U.S., I think on a daily basis. So it really reduces their international FX risk. And Andreessen Horowitz puts together a pretty good estimate of stablecoin volume because some of it's kind of slop in the system where cryptocurrencies are being traded, in a circular fashion, but they have a real economic activity of $1.5 trillion per month. That was achieved last year. And for comparison, I believe SWIFT does closer to 10 trillion a month. So a big difference there. But if some of the portion of SWIFT payments start going over, moves to a stablecoin processing system, you can see that reach parity.
I have a question, Jason. Is it the case that the Genius Act, point where that moniker came from, doesn't allow payment of interest on stablecoins so that it doesn't completely disintermediate bank deposits?
I'm not sure. There might be some nuance to that.
Yeah.
What they were trying to stop was some of the stablecoins were promising really high interest rates, and it did seem like some sort of a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
And they were stopping that.
Right. Yeah. There's kind of workarounds to the system, right? You could do some sort of a cash back or, So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works around. Okay. So our second one is on Robotaxis and Waymos. So as everybody knows, Waymos are operable in a handful of cities in the country. We know that Tesla Robotaxi is testing but not actually rolled out without a human supervisor in the driver's seat in a couple cities. The surprise here is that by the end of the year, Tesla will be doing more Robotaxi rides on a weekly basis than Waymo. So a number of things need to happen there. There's regulatory hurdles. But the reason that this seems like it's a probable surprise is because they can roll out their network faster than Waymo can.
Right. Because how many robotaxis operate today in Austin? 10? Small number.
Yeah. Oh. Jason, why do you think it's been so slow to I would have thought that robotaxis would have been rolled out faster.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. It seems like they have a very cautious approach, but they're not a company that takes cautious approaches. So I don't know.
Yeah, I assume it has to be regulatory related.
Mm-hmm. Roughly how many Waymos? Is it about 2,000 or 3,000 Waymos operating? Or is that
it's more than 2,000, less than 3,000. Yeah.
I've,
And they're rolling them out though. So we're supposed to get them in our city in the next couple months.
right.
We'll be sure to test it out. I still haven't ridden in a Waymo.
Right.
Okay, so number three.
I'll continue with like a crypto type theme. I think this year will be the first year that a quantum computer attack against a crypto Bitcoin wallet will succeed. So this is a quantum computer essentially guessing the password of a Bitcoin wallet. It can be a long duration attack. So this isn't, they call it Q-Day, is when theoretical that a quantum computer in real time can break encryption to intercept a message. This doesn't need to be real time or near real time. This can be a week's or month long attack trying to guess the password of a dormant Bitcoin account with a very large number of Bitcoins in it. And I think that will occur this year.
Jason, I thought that attacks on Bitcoin wallets were oftentimes successful. I think I saw a blurb somewhere that North Korea makes billions of dollars a year by having their IT industry, or whatever you want to call it, North Korea, try to accumulate Bitcoin by breaking into people's wallets.
They are, and that's a more traditional hack. You know, you're either convincing the person to give up the password or something of a more traditional way rather than brute force guessing a password. And there's a lot of Bitcoin wallets that haven't made they have a lot of Bitcoins in them. They haven't made transactions in a very long time. So there wouldn't really be another way to get into this wallet without essentially guessing the password.
Right.
Okay, so number 4. So looking back on last year, we saw a lot of improvements in the AI models, right? The leading edge of AI models. It's probably, as of today, Gemini and ChatGPT are probably the best two, and they're relatively close. Our prediction here is that XAI by the end of next year is definitively the leading foundation model based on a number of things, but most importantly, XAI has shown that they've been faster at being able to implement the latest hardware. And it seems like that hardware pre-training side of models, as Google's demonstrated, is scaling faster. ChatGPT, on the other hand, has managed to increase the quality of a very old model, GPT 4.0, which is really the base model for what they're running today, as they call it 5.1 or whatever they're calling it. They've improved that through reinforcement learning. And barring another major model to come out, I think XAI is in a much better position to come out with a better model.
Will that be sustainable, do you think, Mike and Jason? Or will they just hold the lead for a bit and then Gemini or Chat or someone will reassume the leads?
I think eventually this kind of breaks down into a couple players because it's not going to be economic for there to be, 5 different companies pursuing the leading edge foundation model.
Do you think each company will hold the best model in a different modality, whether it's text or video generation? Or
it seems like it's moving to, and Google's demonstrated this, that in order to make improvements, you need to go multimodal. So
one will be the best.
I think so, but we'll see. All right. And I guess, Hunt, if you don't have any more, I've got one more for tech.
No, I've tried hard, but I'm standing down. I'll try to come up with something for next week, but I haven't been able to come up with a tech surprise.
Okay. So the fifth one that we have is that Congress passes some sort of federal AI legislation. And there's been some hints of this, notably Ron DeSantis and Bernie Sanders are teaming up on an AI Bill of Rights. But there's a lot of interest in having a level playing field, if you will, across the United States and not have a patchwork of compliance and regulatory of the situation. So hopefully that gets done this year.
So is the real surprise that Congress
Get something done.
Works together.
Yeah.
Anything done. Yeah. I don't know whether it belongs in tech, but in terms of surprise, let's add one that the Republicans hold the House. That would be really a surprise. I think on the betting models, it's down to like 10 or 15% that the Republicans will hold the House. So that would be a real surprise, I think. It might have some impact, probably have positive impact on tech stuff because, the Trump administration has been pretty solicitous of whether it be crypto or AI models or whatnot. It's been it's been supportive of most things tech.
Okay, let's take a quick break for a message from Oakcliff Sailing.
My name's Aiden. I'm a boat builder and previously worked for America's Cup Syndicate and SailGP. I was doing a project with saplings, winter saplings here at Oakcliff. We were fixing a broken T-foil on a NACR 20 for the high performance program. We got to work on specifically doing lamination, bagging, and a bit more high-level composite lamination repair. So we got to teach the saplings how to understand a composite schedule as well as pick and choose what kind of cloth, the resin, and heating types you need to fix a important and structural component for a high-performance boat. So if this is something that interests you, definitely come check out Oakcliff for the winter program. We have quite a few international projects coming up.
And now, back to the show.
Most of my time on A, B, and C is going to be on Venezuela since everyone's talking about it. It turns out that you look at Exhibit C, Venezuela is buried in that other OPEC. And of the 7.4 million barrels of other OPEC, Venezuela is only 1 million barrels a day. People say that it has the largest reserves in the world, but those aren't reserves. Those are possible reserves. And it's very heavy oil and requires an enormous amount of CapEx and operating costs. And it's $60 Brent. And none of it's economic. It is the industry sentiment. In terms of the impact on other parts of the oil world, China has operations in Venezuela and Russia has operations. Iran has activity there. And it looks as though this was planned with help from our CIA and Delcy Rodriguez and the head of the police ministry and head of the defense ministry were happy to see Maduro go. They're going to maintain their position in Venezuela. I think one of the things we learned from Iraq was don't do away with the governing structures, because then you really have a mess on your hands. So the lady that won the Nobel Prize will certainly find her way back to Venezuela, but she'll have to get ready for the next set of elections. the U.S. is not going to turn the government over to her. We had abandoned our embassy in Caracas and were represented by Colombia embassy. I think they'll reopen the embassy. There is some kind of a project going on which has caused oil prices to be weak in the last day or two. Has to do with Chevron, which is 250,000 barrels a day out of that billion-barrel capacity, chartering tankers to take them to Venezuela to load oil that's in addition to their liftings, and with that oil coming to the Gulf Coast to be used in refiners other than Chevron. It may be that this is some part of the deal that was negotiated with our CIA. And I think what Trump may be doing, or the Trump administration may be doing, is establishing some kind of a reserve fund, where that reserve fund will be lent to operators, not Chevron, because they're pretty well established there, but say Exxon, Conoco had operated there before, where in effect that fund will underwrite the risk of going back into Venezuela to try to work on the infrastructure. And in a way, that will be good for the average Venezuelan. It'll be just kind of, rather than Exxon, for example, investing a couple $1 billion, they'll borrow from that reserve fund. And then if there's some political problem and they get expropriated again, they'll get debt forgiveness. But a fair amount of that is guesswork at this point. I think by the time we're together 7 days from now, next Wednesday, some of that kind of plan will be evident. Exhibit B, they finally got warmer in New York and warmer all over. That has not helped the gas price. You can see the 26 strip is down to $3.75. I think I'm inclined to go lower. This forecast for 26 of 108.5 may have to be moved up as the year goes on. We're already producing in January 107.5. And the culprit here, if you look at the table just above, is gas from the Permian. The Haynesville is up a little. The Marcellus and the Utica hardly goes up at all. But the Permian is up to 23 Bs and it's still going up. The reason you can tell it's still going up, the Waha price is terribly weak. So there isn't enough pipe capacity to take gas away from the Waha pump in West Texas. So the Waha pump has been trading at zero or negative for a very small margin above zero. So it indicates that the associated gas from oil production is still going up. The oil production in the Permian has flattened out, but the gas-oil ratio continues to go up. That has to be absorbed by LNG. And the good news is LNG liftings are already at that 17.5 predicted for 26. So that's good. The very, very interesting situation here is that power, gas to make power was down 25 versus 24. And in this estimate, it's up a little. I think what's happened is the Trump administration has curtailed closing coal plants and then all the tax credits and whatnot that went into solar, those solar projects are still coming on. So that has caused less need to make gas out of power, power out of gas. As far as Exhibit A with government revenues and expenses, I still believe one of the surprises we discussed last week, macro plus energy, is that the deficit would continue to come down. This $1.5 trillion is, I think, a pretty good estimate for 26. And I think when we get to middle of next year and start doing an estimate for 27, it'll be lower. The key is to have good growth in the economy. The real GNP growth in the third quarter was inexplicably 4%, which is very high. People were predicting 1.5 or 2%. Apparently, it's going to be quite a lot lower in the fourth quarter because of some of the impact of the government shutdown. But that real GNP growth continues to go up, even though new jobs are flat to declining, and the unemployment rate is notched up a little bit, or real GNP growth. And then you layer on top of that 2.5%, 3% inflation. and you get like nominal GNP going up by 6% or something. And all the, will there be individual income tax, payroll taxes, and corporate income tax? Those are all likely to go up with the nominal GNP. So if we can just kind of hold spending flat, I mean, if we go down the line, Social Security, it's going to go up a little bit every year. But if we can hold Medicare and Medicaid flat, and interest, even though there's more debt, interest rates will definitely be lower in fiscal 26. And the Trump administration has done a pretty good job on defense. They're holding it in the $900 billion range. So and then in all other category, which it's hard to imagine, but then all other category reached almost $3 trillion in 21, combating COVID. But of course, what happened is every senator, every congressman got their pet program, and now all that has to be squeezed out of the system. And they did get it down to, took at least $1 trillion out of it. But this 26 forecast is you're down to $1.1 trillion. But consider that $1.1 trillion is still $200 billion higher than it was in 2019, the year before COVID. So hopefully that can be achieved. Mike, Jason, anything else there?
Well, starting next week, we're going to start seeing more talk about a potential government shutdown again, because I think January 30th, we're back at it if something isn't passed ahead of time. I know there's a bill that's going in front of the House this week or early next. So that's another thing to keep an eye on.
No question. No question. The remaining time, we've got to do page 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Why don't we quickly see if Jason has anything on healthcare? But I have a couple of things on the first 4 pages. Why don't we do healthcare first with Jason?
Sure. So next week is going to be JPMorgan's big healthcare conference. And typically a lot of news comes out of that event. It's a week-long event in San Francisco. A lot of announcements, and oftentimes there's a lot of M&A deals that are announced during that week. Other news is, because it's such a big part of the pharma market right now, Novo Nordisk received FDA approval of a pill form of Wegovy, and they're pricing it at, I believe, $150 a month, so even cheaper. Again, Novo Nordisk is the first to market with this weight loss drug now in pill form. Eli Lilly's closely following them. The interesting thing about Eli Lilly's is it's going to be a small molecule, which makes it much easier and cheaper to manufacture. So I think we're nowhere done with seeing the price competition in this space.
Yeah, Lilly actually acquired another obesity drug asset.
Yeah. And now that it's not an injectable, it's even more likely to be adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Other than that, let's see. There's something interesting that was announced today is we've been digging into MRD testing. So this is minimal residual disease testing, detection of DNA fragments of cancerous tumors that are shed into the bloodstream. So we think this is an area that's going to have much wider adoption in the future. The interesting announcement today kind of validated a thesis. The thesis we've been working on is that a cancer drug manufacturer is launching a phase 3 study in partnership with one of these testing companies. And they're going to enroll patients in the study that test positive, have multiple positive tests for a specific cancer, only detected through bloodstream testing. It's at a stage where they can't yet image it with traditional imaging techniques. And they're going to treat it with the goal of completely eliminating any tumor fragments from being detected in the bloodstream. So really interesting. It's either you can see it being a very early treatment before a tumor grows large enough to detect, or a late stage after the tumor has been removed from a patient. You think it's cleared, but MRD tests come back positive. This will give evidence that you can continue to treat it to completely clear it from the system.
That's interesting. On page 1, 2, 3, and 4, most interesting one here to me is Netflix, which is trying to acquire Warner. And I think everybody looking at Warner thinks the price has gotten way too high. And Netflix, which has a high price, this is over on page 4, $134, last week was trading at 91. They're going to finance it mostly with debt. And I think most long-term Netflix stockholders would wish that this Warner thing would just go away, that they'll wind up with a debt-laden balance sheet rather than more or less a debt-free balance sheet. How much content does Warner have? Hasn't Netflix shown the ability to arrange content and have a dominant share of the streaming market? Mike, Jason, any view there?
That summed it up for me.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems, I don't know that I have a strong view on it. I mean, it's an opportunity to acquire a whole bunch of assets in one fell swoop, but I don't know that they really need to. So,
right. The evergreen assets were something that everyone harped on Netflix for not having, and now they're actually starting to build those organically.
mm-hmm.
So do they need to purchase them?
Right.
I think it's more about foreclosing competition.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly, probably the antitrust, case is better against Paramount than it is against Netflix because of how they're going to break things up. So it's one of those, the antitrust regulatory regime is broken. And that was evidence from Nvidia acquiring the chip startup Grok.
Or not acquiring.
Right? Licensing and then taking 90% of the staff, rather than even bother with the risk that they have to deal with antitrust. They just set up a deal that makes more sense for them. And to their credit, they made sure all the employees were taken care of, but you could easily see where this could go a different direction, where just a few of the employees get plucked and the rest of them are sort of left as bag holders, and investors too. And that sort of breaks the whole innovation cycle of Silicon Valley, where people go to work for startups for lower pay and equity compensation in hopes that lottery ticket pays out. If you have a situation where people get the lottery ticket and get zero for it, even though they got a quote unquote exit because people or these companies realized they had to work around this regulatory regime, it's really a negative for everybody.
Right. Nvidia and the conference in Las Vegas, how much of an improvement is the Rubin chip as compared to the Blackwell chip as compared to the Hopper chip?
Yeah, it's impressive. The pretty cool stat was a token cost will be about 1/10 of what it is today. And I shouldn't even say today because Blackwells aren't really fully rolled out everywhere, but 1/10 of Blackwell. And training a model can be done in 1/4 of the time as one could on a Blackwell. The Rubin platform is a complete redesign of the Nvidia DGX, or whatever you want to call their data center system architecture. And it includes 6 different chips that were completely redesigned. So we've talked about this before, where Nvidia sort of evolved from a designer of graphics processing units to a designer and builder of data centers. And there's a lot more than a GPU in a data center. There's the networking, there is a CPU. And the CPU for Rubin is, at least according to the stats, going to be the fastest CPU on the market. So there's a lot going on in this thing. And question is, what are they going to do next? And we'll find out at their next big GTC conference. But the cadence at which they're moving is very fast, and the performance improvements are very fast. And that bodes well for the market that we're in today, because it will make good sense for people to move to the new hardware.
What else in that page 1, 2, 3, 4 news did we have this week?
XAI raised another $20 billion. which they will need.
Right.
Oh, another note, kind of interesting. JPMorgan, this is only related to the first 4 pages because of AI, but JPMorgan's asset management division is going to cut ties with all of their proxy advisory firms. And they are going to instead use an internally developed artificial intelligence powered platform that they called Proxy IQ to assist in determining how they're going to vote the shares. Proxy firms, people got pretty frustrated with them as the mission seemed to shift away from what they were there for to pushing things that maybe weren't a priority for most shareholders.
And then I have an impact to ASML on page 3. There's been news that a group of ex-ASML employees that were Chinese nationals have left the company, went back to China and reverse engineered a portion of their EUV machines. And in particular, this is the light source, which is, it's very complicated to be able to generate this wavelength of EUV light. Essentially, you're vaporizing tin and hitting it with lasers. It's a crazy engineering feat, but that's one of many very complicated pieces that they have to reverse engineer in order to build one of these machines. I think really the implication is they're getting a lot of experience on building lithography machines, advanced machines, and really ASML's bread and butter is selling not the EUV, but the older generation DUV machines into China. So as they get better at making lithography machines overall, I think a big impact that no one's really talking about is the ASML sales of DUV machines. Can China reliably make very functional, high throughput DUV machines nationally and not need ASML any longer? I think that might have in the shorter term, that has a bigger impact on ASML's business than if they reproduce EUV machines.
I have a question that we can deal with after next week, but the question I have, especially with all the publicity about our activity in Venezuela, is if Taiwan either voluntarily or kind of involuntarily submitted to direction from Beijing, let's put it that way, such that TSMC engineers and management, whatnot, just started to leave to the extent they were permitted to, how hard would it be in the activity that TSMC's put together? They're building in Arizona, and I think just 30 minutes away, Intel's done a lot of building ASML machines and whatever in Arizona. How long would it take to be able to do 3 nanometer or 2 nanometer or whatnot chips with, without a lot of rejects outside of Taiwan? Is that a 12-month exercise or 18 months, or it would be, much longer than that? Jason, Mike, do you have any views?
I think we're well on our way to having that in place. I believe they're producing 3 nanometer there now, but you have to remember every wafer produced in Arizona is then sent to Southeast Asia for the rest of the processing, all the packaging, everything else. So it does. People talk about the increased costs of the wafers in Arizona. The wafers themselves cost more, and then the expense to process the rest of the manufacturing is more expensive as well, since you have to move it across the world again.
Right.
But they're building the factories to do the packaging and all this other that's in process right now.
Yes, but volume wise,
Sure,
it's not even close, right? Volume of wafers that are spit out by Taiwan Semiconductor in Taiwan. It would take a lot more work in the U.S. to get to a point where we could do that. And remember, like, their business model is mainly for those fabs to be built and kept online, and essentially profits harvested from them for many years into the future. So I don't know. I don't think that, this didn't make it on our surprises for geopolitical things, that there would be a war or that Taiwan would even become part of China, but it certainly is a possibility. And there's no question that China has been very vocal about wanting to reassimilate Taiwan. So
Right.
I think it
I mean-
happens eventually, and it happens peacefully.
Right. Well, now we're really over our 5-minute overage. So anyway, everyone, we'll be here 7 days from now. We're back on a Wednesday schedule, and next week will be healthcare surprises. And in the meantime, everyone be well and stay healthy, and we'll see you in 7 days. Thanks very much for listening. Take care.
The views expressed on this podcast are the host alone and do not constitute an offer to sell or a recommendation to purchase or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security nor a recommendation for any investment product or service. While certain information contained herein has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, neither the host nor any of their employers or their affiliates have independently verified this information, and its accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Accordingly, no representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made as to, and no reliance should be placed on, the fairness, accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of this information. The host and all employers and their affiliated persons assume no liability for this information and no obligation to update the information or analysis contained herein in the future, and may or may not hold positions in the securities mentioned.